Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and peace be upon you all. Welcome to this 4-part series on becoming whole, finding peace through the pain. That's the title. I'm sure you guys have seen already, right? And this is on an Islamic psychological approach to cultivating spiritual and emotional strength. So what I hope, the goal of this series, inshallah, is to, number one, renew your relationship and your view of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? Reignite that connection. Wherever you're at, no matter how strong or how weak you feel that connection is, the goal is to reignite that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number two, it's to renew your relationship with yourself. Because your relationship with yourself impacts the way you walk towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to look at all the pieces in our lives that keep us from feeling full and whole and nourished and sufficed. The third goal is to help you gain tools that can help you experience greater meaning and peace during your difficult times, during the struggles that you're going through, but even during the happy times. We forget that happiness does not always equate to peace. And this is something that many people confuse, right? Is that we think like, oh, if I'm happy, I'm going to be at peace. Happiness is an emotion. It's not a permanent, it's not a deeper state, right? You could feel happiness and sadness in one day. But peace is something different. It's a little bit more settling. It's a little bit more permanent. And so, inshallah, also one of the goals is to help us, prepare for Ramadan. So we organize this, series in a way that it kind of continues right before and stops right before Ramadan. So it can help you and me prepare our hearts, redirect our hearts towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not wait until Ramadan to, start working on ourselves. And I think that's what happens a lot, right? We wait till Ramadan and we want to snap our hearts into motion and say, okay, feel, okay, experience, okay, connect. And it's not. And then by the time it does, you're already halfway into Ramadan or in the last 10 days. So the goal is to start doing the work now, inshallah, so that we can start opening our heart to receive. One of the things that we forget is that to make room for what we want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us, we have to make room in our heart. And so sometimes we go into Ramadan and we say, I want Allah to give me this, and I want to feel this, and I want this iman, and I want this, but we didn't make room in our heart. So if you were to redecorate your house, you'd first clean your house before you put that new rug or that new piece of furniture. You'd clean, because the decoration only becomes more beautified when you've made room for it, when you've took out the old. But if you came and you just put the new rug on top of the old rug, you wouldn't really feel a difference. You wouldn't feel that renewal. So one of the things we always have to keep in mind is that we have to make room in our hearts for what we want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us. So with that, I want to first thank you for bringing your heart. And this is something that I always say, because the heart is the most important entity within us that we can bring into any space. If you come with your ego or your nafs, you walk away with nothing. Your heart gets no share. Right? Amu Fikri used to always say that, you're sincere when the nafs doesn't get a share from what you're doing. So I start with thank you for bringing your heart, so that it can kind of redirect you to this most important part within you. What walked into this room as your lead? Was it your nafs? Or was it just mindlessly? And if you did, that's okay. Let's redirect. Let's remember that the most important part within us right now is our heart. And if you came in with your nafs, or you came in for whatever, my friend is coming, I'll come with her, or, I'm just, unintentionally, just going with the motions. It's okay, but redirect now. Renew your intention now, so that you can walk away with more than what you came intending to get. Because intentions are so powerful. Intentions, they set you up to receive more than you would if you didn't have an intention. So you could be coming here and, your heart is not present. Your heart isn't, because intentions start in the mind, but they are set in the heart. You can say, oh, I want to do this, but the intention is the truth of why you're doing it. So now is the time, it's never too late to renew our intentions. So when you intend, the heart is activated. The heart is like, okay, I'm connected now to what we're about to do. So guess what? The heart now comes in and is more focused. It's more attentive. It's ready to receive what it intended. So you walk away with more. You walk away a little bit more nourished. You walk away a little bit more sufficed. You walk away with a shift. Maybe you came in here heavy-hearted. Now you walk away a little lighter. And that's the goal, is that we don't want our heart to stay in that same stuck space. Okay, so pain, right? Pain brought you here, bad things that are weighing you down. And I thank you for, for your vulnerability, being able to share that. No, it's not always easy, but yeah, pain, right? And that's one thing we all have in common, by the way, is that we all know pain. Pain is inevitable. It's part of the human experience. If one person in this room told me they never felt pain, that's questionable to me, right? So we all feel pain. You might be going through pain right now. You might be going through heaviness right now. You might feel stuck and feel hopeless. You might not know when your faraj is going to be. You might not know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala holds for you. You might be coming in here wishing that you can walk away more whole, more lighter. And that's really the goal, inshallah. So in this series, I really hope, inshallah, with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to speak to those whose hearts are weighed down by the heaviness of their tests and of the world. Those who don't feel a connection in their relationship with themselves or with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I also hope to speak to those who feel unseen, unheard, unappreciated in their homes, in their relationships, and in their families. I hope to speak to those who are on cruise control, going through the motions, feeling numb. And this is very common nowadays with social media, with the internet, with access to our phones all the time. This is one of the biggest issues, is that people are more disconnected than ever. So we are connected, but we're not experiencing connection. And this is a big issue, is that people are doing a lot. It could be very busy, talking to many people, spoke to this person, text that person, did this task, checked off this task. But when they go to bed at night, they don't feel nourished. They don't feel sufficed, and they don't feel enough. So how can we get to a place where when we go to bed at night, we can put our hand over our heart and we can feel like, alhamdulillah, this day was a quality day. Ya Allah, help me do better tomorrow. Not, what did I do today? I know I did a lot, but what's when you do a lot and you're like, at the end of the day, you're like, wait, what did I accomplish? That's a disconnect. It's not because you didn't accomplish a lot. It's because you were disconnected from what you were accomplishing. So inshallah, I hope again to speak to those who are on cruise control, who have been going through the motions, feeling numb, disconnected from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, themselves, their loved ones, and the blessings in their life. And so I hope to also speak to those who maybe went or are going through a difficult test, whether that's mental health challenges, traumas, difficulties. Those are who are in pain. And, and that pain is leaving you not knowing who you are, not feeling very uncertain about the future, and feeling disconnected from your truth and who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. So first, I'll tell you a little bit about my own journey and, why I do this work, right, of integrating Islam and psychology and approaching psychospiritual wellness through an Islamic psychological lens. So early on, when I first started this journey, it was at a time when mental health and psychology wasn't really integrated with our spirituality, and there was a huge stigma on mental health. But I remember every time that I'd go to the seerah, and this is like, when you are looking at Islam, especially with a young lens, right, things are a little bit more simpler. So I remember when I first started studying and started looking at the seerah and tafsir, I would see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would speak to our emotional experiences. I would see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never negated any aspect of ourselves. That sometimes in our community spaces we negate. that sometimes in our community spaces we minimize. But when you look at the Quran and you look at how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to our heart, when you look at the seerah and how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam engaged with his companions and how the teachings that he has taught us, they all speak to our holistic well-being. So for me, I became really passionate, alhamdulillah, since the age of 18 about integrating those two worlds. How does Islam speak to our psychology? But how does also the psychological world and the self-help world align with the teachings of Islam that are already there? So through that merge, and I hope to, share some of those integrations with you in this series today, inshallah, because that's what we want. We want to grow spiritually, but also mentally and emotionally, because we have to understand that these two worlds affect each other. You can't be working on your spirituality and neglect yourself emotionally, mentally, physically even. And that's what I saw early on, that there was a separation. It's almost like we were living in compartments. My deen is over here, my iman is over here, and this is my, self-love is over here, or my mental health is over here. And so as a young adult at the time, my greatest questions were more personal. They started out really for me, and it was a personal journey. And it was really asking like, well, how can I love myself? Or how do I have a relationship with myself that is rooted in my relationship with Allah? So I had just started really practicing or increasing in practice at the age of 17. And so I was very sensitive to, I don't want to be arrogant, or I don't want to, learn something that's outside of our Aqidah. So the goal is, how can these two also relationships come together? My relationship with Allah and my relationship with myself. Because we can't live in compartments. That's actually the opposite of wholeness. So we want to be whole, and we have to see the connection between all the areas of our life. We can't be, this is my mental health over here, and then this is my relationship with Allah over here. It's not going to work. You're going to feel a disconnect. And that's what I felt at 18. I felt, I'm so disconnected. I don't know who I am. And I don't know how can I know myself through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one of the greatest epiphanies on my path was the statement, "Man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbahu." Whoever knows himself knows his Lord. And that was the first time that I actually came across a statement that linked knowing myself and knowing Allah. Because usually when I would hear about knowing yourself or just the self in general, it would be in the context of taming your nafs, being critical, holding yourself into account. And so I really craved a more holistic understanding of knowing myself that included self-accountability, but did not negate compassion, and did not negate love, and did not negate nourishment for myself. So this led me on, a 10-year plus journey of studying psychology, alhamdulillah. Alongside that, also constantly being in pursuit of, Islamic studies and trying to integrate these two worlds. And so from that, I was able to develop the heart over mind and ego approach to psychospiritual wellness, which teaches you about the importance of aligning ourselves and the entities within us. Like, what is the heart for? What is the mind for? What is the nafs for? And learning how to align, those areas of ourselves. And that's what led to the development of the Home Institute. So we begin with defining what it means to be whole, okay? And to do that, I have to connect your heart to an ayah in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the day which we return to Him. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about this day, يَوْمًا لَا يَنْفَعْ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ, right? Except what? The day where no wealth or children will benefit a person. Except what? Except who? إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. So what is qalbin salim? If I asked you, a lot of people, we translate it as what? Sound heart. So as I looked into this, I remember early on, I'm like, well, salim, it's not just, sound, we think, okay, something that is pure, right? But salim is also something that is whole, something that is complete. So why did I choose the title Becoming Whole? Because wholeness is a really crucial part of our path as a Muslim. And really, the essence of submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeking our wholeness through Him. And I'll ask you this, would Allah depend your wholeness on anyone or anything that He can take away? No. A lot of people right now, their wholeness is rooted in things that they can't control, Their wholeness is rooted in things that they don't have or want. Oh, I will only be whole if I get that. Their wholeness is rooted in material wealth. Their wholeness is rooted maybe even in their children, in their spouses. And if you notice, even with marriage, right, the ayah, I mean, the saying in our faith, or I believe it's a hadith about how marriage completes what? Doesn't complete you, it completes half your deen. There's a big difference. Marriage, spouses complement each other. But as they come together, it's supposed to facilitate your wholeness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so because the ayah is clear, those who come back to Allah with a whole heart, a sound heart. And it's interesting that he says children before that. No wealth, but also children. So what does that mean? No wealth, material, but also people. And that doesn't negate that we need people. Of course, we're human beings. We need connection, right? Spouses need each other. We are not created to be like independent, this extreme independent mindset that's being promoted these days, right? No, this does not negate that. But I know that whatever Allah gives or whatever Allah takes away, I have the opportunity to be whole through Him. I have the opportunity to still come back to Him with qalbin salim. This is really empowering. Because it makes you understand that your worth is through Allah. And today, many of us have defined our worth by other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so first, it's wholeness is first that, coming back to Allah subhanahu, cultivating a heart that seeks to be sufficed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because that is what a whole heart is, right? You feel full, you feel nourished, you are sufficed through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we're taught this in the Quran, right? Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. Sufficient is Allah. For what? For you, for your heart. And we're often taught to say that when people disappoint us, right? When things don't go right in our lives, when we're faced with difficulty, that Allah is enough for my heart. That's another translation. Allah is enough for me, right? Not just sufficient. So wholeness is when something is put together. It's something when it's complete. Even if it has broken parts, that's key. A bowl can be broken into pieces, but you can put it back together and it'll be complete, right? In fact, I think there's a Japanese practice where they put broken pieces of a bowl together with gold, right? And so this is just to kind of show that, that something can still be complete even if it has those broken pieces. And that's how I really want to encourage you to look at your own life. Is that sometimes you go through life and you get hit with a test and you feel like it shatters you, it breaks you. And you do feel like you have broken pieces. And it does feel like you don't know who you are. But you know what? Remember we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those whom He tests. So people often ask me this, even today, I got that question, subhanAllah, earlier today. Well, why does Allah love those whom He tests? It's so painful. Does He want this pain for me? And so this is, a question I reflected on for a long time. And really the best way to understand it is through a parent-child relationship. Sometimes a parent will give a consequence to a child, or will take away something from the child that is hurtful. Right? It hurts to the child. It's hurtful, but the parent knows what is best for the child, right? But also, it's what Allah. So in that relationship, the parent is doing something for the child, even though the child cannot see it. It's the same with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This journey of becoming whole is to look for what Allah is giving me as I'm going through the pain. What is Allah doing for you, not against you? What is Allah facilitating in my life? Even this test, this pain, what is it guiding me to? What is this pain leading me to do more of? Because that's what pain does. If you always felt ease, by the way, if you always felt like things were easy, you would never have any reason to learn something new or to try to like improve or change. You're comfortable. Even Helen Keller, she taught, I'm sure you guys are familiar with her story. She was blind. She said that there's something you get from difficulty that you never get from times of ease. Right? There's a strength, a resilience. You have to try something new because you're uncomfortable. You have to stop doing something because you're uncomfortable. You have to, you move, you shift. And through that, Allah's giving you. And that's the thing, is that in any opportunity, even when you feel pain, you have the opportunity to look for meaning through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even those broken parts, they had to fall for a reason. Do you want to know why? Because as we go through life, we acquire layers that don't belong to us. We interpret ourselves through a lens that is not divine, that is not through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We maybe understand our worth through people who Allah did not want us to see our worth through. Maybe through experiences, we've had a different view of Allah, of ourselves. We've interpreted things in a way that does not serve us. Maybe what we attached our worth to was not Allah. So these layers have to fall. And only the one who loves you doesn't want you to continue walking with false layers. Because it's not true. They don't serve you. It doesn't allow you to be authentic. So when you find yourself like, what's happening? I'm going through this test. I feel like I'm falling apart. No, Allah is creating a process for you to see all your pieces that you've been carrying. And as a therapist, I see this when I get clients and we go through working through trauma. That's what it is. And I try to explain it this way because that's actually the process of healing, is that you come into a space where you can lay out all the pieces and you get to see which one, hey, why have I been carrying that piece? That doesn't belong to me. Why have I been carrying this? That doesn't belong to me. That doesn't serve me. That actually keeps me from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And wow, this piece, I've been attaching my worth to this. Let's get rid of this. So then when you're done, guess what? Now you can put yourself back together, but now the pieces that you're putting yourself back together are pieces that are aligned with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now your molding is through Allah, not through the people, not through your experiences. It's through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we each have this opportunity that whenever we're going through pain, whenever we're going through struggles, we have to remind ourselves that Allah is giving me an opportunity here to build myself and be molded through Him. This is His love. And this is in the Quran, this concept, this relationship between love and molding, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Musa alayhi salam in Surah Taha, وَأَلْقَيْتُ عَلَيْكَ مَحَبَّةً مِّنِّي وَلِتُصْنَعَ عَلَى عَيْنِي. And I have bestowed upon you love from me so that you may be molded or raised under my eye. وَلِتُصْنَعَ, right? Tusna is like you're molding something, you're raising something, you're making something. There's a link here between Allah's love and His molding of you. Did Musa have a difficult life? He had the most difficult life. Nobody is tested like the Prophets alayhim salam. If you look at the part right before this sentence where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to Musa. By the way, when we read this verse, we don't read it and think, oh, Allah is just talking to Musa. No, you read it as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to you, to your heart. And I encourage you to do this, to open Surah Taha and read it as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to you. Surah Taha came at a time where the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was going through the most difficult time. And it starts out with what? Taha ma anzalna alayka al-Qur'ana litashqa. Right? What does this mean? This Quran, this message, this deen, it's not there to burden you. It's a means to your healing. It's a means to your opening. It's not there to weigh you down. And this is said it to the Prophet ﷺ. But it's for our hearts. How many of us open the Quran and read this ayah as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to us? Redirect you back to that ayah in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and I have bestowed upon you love from me so that you may be raised under my eye, under my eye. Like that is, you know, when a mother says that to a child, it's so beautiful, right? But this is Allah saying it to us. How many of us look at our lives as Allah is my greatest teacher and Allah is my greatest love, and that every step of the way He is molding me, He is shaping me. That yes, I have parents and they are Rabb al-Bayt, but Allah is Rabb al-Alameen. Don't forget your greatest Rabb. Right? Isn't that interesting that in Arabic we say the parents are Rabb al-Bayt? Because parents are that bridge between you and Allah, right? That the child doesn't know Allah, but they know, okay, my parents. And then eventually that's supposed to translate into, oh wait, Rabb al-Bayt, no, Rabb. And of course they are Allah's ambassadors in this earth, and Rabb al-Alameen, right? But I want you to think about this. Before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this part of, I bestowed, love upon you, and I have raised you under my eye, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds Musa of his favors upon him, right? And He reminds him of, how He inspired his mother to put his basket into the river, and that he went into the hands of Fir'aun. I want you to think about this. Musa alayhi salam was disconnected from his mother at such a young age. And not only that, but sometimes people are disconnected from their mothers and then they're put into, like, let's say they're adopted by a kind family, or no, he went to the enemy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Fir'aun. But Allah's saying, but that you are still, it doesn't matter your circumstance, I'm still molding you. So this is a reminder to you that your circumstances might be hard, and yes, the test is difficult. This doesn't negate the pain that comes with tests. But don't forget that just because you're in a difficult circumstance, that Allah's not molding you. Don't forget that He's molding you, because He's molding you, and He's raising you, and He's giving you what you need, but you just can't see it. So when you can't see it with your physical eye, your basar, see it with your basira. Right? We have two different. In Islam, we learn things through spiritual. We can learn one concept, and they could take two forms. Right? One is a spiritual form, and one is a physical form. So even sight has spiritual form and a physical form. Sight has physical form, what you see with your physical eye, and then what you see with your heart. And so that's what we want. When our physical eye cannot see changes in front of us, when our physical eye cannot see beyond the veil that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put, when our physical eye cannot see what our future holds, when our physical eye cannot see what Allah is doing for us, use the sight of your heart. Keep the eye of your heart on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it takes work. It's constantly redirecting. We have so many influences, so many, we have to constantly be redirecting our heart back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So wholeness, again, is about interconnectedness and holisticness, looking at all the areas that interact with each other outside of us, but also looking at all the aspects within us that interact with each other, all pointing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is essentially what an Islamic psychological approach is. It's about that interconnectedness. And so Islamic psychology is rooted in that monotheistic worldview, the view of Tawheed, right? We want to understand our psychology through the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is really what differentiates this approach from any other approach, is that who we want to understand ourselves through. And psychology is a study of human behavior, right? It's a science of human behavior, but it's more than that. It's just an oversimplified definition, but we want to understand ourselves through the one who created us. And why would you want to understand yourself through anyone else other than your creator? I mean, we don't even deal in this way with cars. Like, for example, you wanted to understand a Toyota, would you go to a Tesla manual? Vice versa, if you wanted to understand a Tesla, would you go to a Toyota manual? You wouldn't, right? You go to the one who made that car. You go to the manual. But yet, with ourselves, for some reason, we think, oh, you know what? Let me go in all the other directions except my creator, and think that we're going to actually get some alignment. Toyota is not going to be aligned if you try to fix it like you would fix a Tesla. It's not going to feel that aligned, right? Or you might do something actually incorrect. Vice versa, right? Same thing with an Android and an iPhone. There's just different makes, different models, different designs. And so we have to think about this. Part of looking at things through an Islamic psychological lens is understanding that I'm trying to look and understand that myself through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah, when he talks about this monotheistic worldview, this worldview of tawheed, looking at things, through the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says that it's a unity of 3 separate relationships. One is our relationship with Allah, our relationship with others, nature, and the universe, and then our relationship with ourselves. Very holistic, right? This is Imam al-Ghazali, hundreds of years ago. I say this because, now in just the last few decades, is the Western psychology world looking at a holistic approach. And, obviously in the West, a lot of Islam's contribution to psychology is negated and is ignored, So even when you look at like the history of psychology, it's actually a relatively new science. But when you look at the Islamic history and Islamic contributions, they've been doing this since the 15th century, right? During the golden age of Islam, where scholars from all over the world, they contributed to different sciences. Actually, it was Islamic scholars like Al-Razi and Ibn Sina, rahimahullah, right, that contributed, that changed the perspective of the European world about mental health. So at the time, the European Christian world were saying that, people who struggled with mental health were witches or demonic. It was Al-Razi and Ibn Sina and Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, who changed that perspective. And not only that, they contributed to Europe being in the Renaissance period. That period of change, they wouldn't have done that without Islamic scholars, because Islamic scholars, during the golden age of Islam, people from all over the world were going to study, and learn from Islamic teachers. But I want you to think about what was guiding them, what was motivating them. It was Tawheed. It was La ilaha illallah, and that was the destination, that was the focus, and that was the end, not the means. And this is something that we have to really learn from in this world, is that when we seek to learn, who is our destination? What is our destination? Just learning for the sake of learning? Well, guess what? Not all knowledge is beneficial. That's why we ask Allah, Allahumma as'aluka ilman nafi'an wa a'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa'. Right? We ask for beneficial knowledge because just because you know something doesn't mean it actually benefits you. And so Islam really simplifies things. So when you're about to study and you make that dua, you're asking Allah to give you what benefits you. When you're about to embark on a new career, you make that dua, you ask Allah to give you and help you learn what benefits you. But the end, the goal is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why they were able to move mountains. That's why they were able to contribute to the entire world. That's why they were so great. Because they were guided by Tawheed. They were guided by La ilaha illallah. And so looking at psychology from an Islamic perspective and looking at who we are is looking at the relationship, is looking at it through the lens of Tawheed. And looking at these 3 relationships that come together. My relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, my relationship with myself, and then my relationship with others, nature, and the universe. And so Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah says these relationships are not strange to one another. And there are no they are interconnected, but they're moving in the same direction, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It really does simplify things, So then psychology is about knowledge of the self. That's why people want to study psychology. They want to understand themselves, or they want to understand others. So then we ask ourselves, why do we seek knowledge? Why do we seek self-knowledge? It goes back to Man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbahu. Whoever knows himself knows Allah. It's the same thing. This particular statement, I had so many questions about the statement. When I first came across it, it was very confusing to me and I didn't understand it, but I knew it was very meaningful because it was, like I said, it was the first time that I saw a statement that brought these 2 worlds together, your relationship with yourself and relationship with Allah. And I'm like, wow, how do these 2 can come together, because at the time when I would ask about these 2 relationships, it was always in the sense of like accountability. Even when I brought this statement to like teachers, they would say like, it's the more you hold yourself accountable, the more you the more you get closer to Allah, which is true. Which is true. But I felt it wasn't a holistic answer. But I didn't know that at the time. I just knew, like, okay, I need to keep searching. And of course, with any question that you have for Allah, He chooses the timing and He chooses when to unveil you from that answer. And it took years, by the way, for me to get that answer. I think I started having this question and confusion about this, like maybe 3-4 years. It took time. But I remember the answer came for me one day when I was by the ocean, and I was thinking about this vast ocean in front of me. I was like, every time I'm there, I can't help but think about how great Allah is. But I've been there a million times. SubhanAllah, that day, it was like when I felt like I got Allah connected me to the answer, which is what? Okay, so I am sitting here. When I reflect on the ocean, it directs me to Allah. We say SubhanAllah. When I just saw the sunset, it directs me to Allah. I said SubhanAllah. And then it hit me that day. And I remember saying to myself, well, I witnessed the creation, it leads me to the Creator. And then I said, I'm His creation too. And that's the reality, is that we are His creation too. So knowing ourselves, connecting to ourselves, should point us to Allah too. The problem is when you make yourself the destination, is when you stop at yourself, is when you find something beautiful about yourself and you don't thank Allah, and you don't remember who gave it to you. You don't have shukr. It's when you depend on yourself to have all the answers. And it's when you constantly make yourself like that permanent place and don't direct it back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's harmful. And it's harmful because we are not meant to handle that burden. And unfortunately, in this me, myself, and I culture, in this ego-promoting culture, in this narcissist-promoting culture, there is these messages that tell people, and this is something I actually saw along the way when I would go into self-help book, when I would read self-help books or read psychology, about psychology. One of the concepts that always didn't settle well with me was this concept of you are the master of yourself. Right? You are, meaning and I'm like, no, that doesn't settle, because if I make myself the master of myself, I actually harm myself, because I place on myself a burden that Allah did not design me to bear. Just like if a toddler says, I'm dependent on myself, and the parent is right there. You're not, you need me. And so we need Allah. We will always need Allah. And this world is teaching people to not be in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this creates a lot of harm. This ayah in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, La yukallifu Allahu nafsan illa wasa'ha. A lot of times people will say, which means that Allah does not burden a soul more than it can bear. People will say, well, I can't bear this. But when you reflect upon this and you break it down, what they can't bear, what they can bear, most of the time it's what? It's things that they brought into the process, not the test itself. So it's true. La yukallifu Allahu nafsan illa wasa'ha. Allah does not test us more than what we can bear, but sometimes we burden ourselves in a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not ask us to. And we burden this mind in a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not ask us to. And this is actually one of the key experiences for me that led me to developing the heart over mind and ego approach, which stands for home. And, it's because I realized that this mind I was treating like the authority. But then I put my mind in sujood and I humble it every day. So no, this mind is not meant to be the authority. Not every thought you have is real, but it's not true. And that I don't need to follow every single thought that this mind comes back to me with. And so sometimes we burden our mind more than it can bear. You have a problem in front of you, and then you don't have a solution. So what do? What do people do? Think again. Think again, think again, think again. You burden your mind, but the mind comes back to you. The mind is a rational being. It's there to process. It's a machine. right? It's like, a copy machine has some set functions. Your mind has set functions. And so it's going to process the information. And it comes back to you with no solution. So guess what? Your nafs doesn't like that. Your nafs likes comfort. No, that's not okay. I don't feel comfortable right now. I feel fear. I feel anxiety. No. Think again. This is what leads people in this loop that they can't get out of. And so in those moments, it's almost like the nafs is bullying the mind. But then there's this heart that when you connect it to Allah, it sees things that the mind cannot see. Okay, I don't have the answers in front of me, but I know Allah is there. I can't see the future, but I know Allah is there. I know that there's meaning for me in this experience. I know that Allah is doing something for me in this experience. So I humble this mind, and now as I'm in sujood, I'm remembering this. I'm not just now making sujood ordinarily. No, when I make sujood, now I am going to remember that I'm humbling this part of me that I've burdened. That I remember that I am in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahu al-Ghani wa nahnu al-Fuqara. I will always be in need of Allah. And actually forgetting that need contributes to so many struggles. We struggle when we forget we need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just like a toddler will struggle if they forget they needed their parents. And so one thing I always say to my students is that when I teach like codependency, for example, right? And I'm sure codependency is like when you have unhealthy attachment. I say, a lot of things that are destructive when you do with the people, they're beautiful when you do with Allah. So it's harmful to be codependent with the people, but it's beautiful when you're codependent with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, It's harmful when it doesn't help you when you're, let's say, you show desperation to the people or you beg to the people, right? But it's beautiful when you do it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because He's the only one worthy of that. Allah didn't create anyone else worthy of that. And no one else can fulfill our needs like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we embark on this journey for the purpose, inshallah, of directing our hearts back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That, Ya Allah, I want to know myself so that I can come closer to you. I want to know myself so I can understand you. I want to know myself so that I can, utilize everything you have given me in service of you, and in service of the good that's pleasing to you, and in service of the creation, in a good way. But when Allah is not the destination, you become the end, not the means. Just like, the car, right? If you stay in your car, you never move. What's the point of a car? We are the means to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's given us these facets within us, a mind, heart, right? And so we have to direct them towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if we want to use them efficiently. So we start by remembering who we are. And the reality is that many of us are confused about this part, right? Or we live from a place that is not really who we are. So one of the things that is really important to connect to is that who you are at its core is your ruh, your soul, the part of you that was with Allah and the part of you that returns to Allah. And that is the most permanent part of you. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. The human experience is the temporary part of us. It is not who you are. It is what you're going through. This physical body is a vessel. But who you are at your core was who you were with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the part of you that transcends this physical body when it dies. And that's the part we want to live from. Because if you live from your human experience, you'll never be satisfied. And this journey is about aligning yourself. To live from a place, you have to strengthen that place. So what does the ruh, what is it designed to do? It's designed to long for Allah, to connect to Allah, to be nourished through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has its own food supply, right? It has its own form of nourishment. Just like the physical body has its own form of nourishment, the ruh has its own form of nourishment. So where have I been living from? You know, and am I treating the human experience as the permanent part? And then the spiritual experience is like my side hustle, as they would say, as the cool people say, right? So is it like a side thing, or is it my actually who I am, my priority, the part of me that I know goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So that's where we start. We start by redirecting our attention to this most noble, most sacred part within us, the part of us that has a permanent home, that's not in this world. The part of us that we hope Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls back, Ya ayyuhan nafsul mutma'inna irja'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyah, right? You know, this part, the radiyatan mardiyah, is not just the ruh that's pleased with Allah. I mean, not just the ruh that Allah is pleased with, but the ruh that is also pleased with Allah. And that's something I missed for a long time when I would read that ayah. I mean, it was beautiful enough just that, you know, Allah calls us back and Allah is pleased with us. But it's so interesting that here's Allah saying, welcoming back, not so beautifully, not just a soul that Allah is pleased with. He's saying this soul is also pleased with Allah. How beautiful is that? That Allah doesn't just want us to come back with Him pleased with us, He also wants you pleased with Him. And that's what Rida is. That you're pleased with Allah as your Lord, you're pleased with Him and His role in your life and what He has done for you, and that His love and with His and you're pleased with His love for you, His care for you, that He is your Rabb, your caretaker. And so many people, you know, many times when we talk about pain, we forget that the prophets alayhim salam were the most tested, the ones who went through the most pain. And I gave you the example of Musa alayhi salam. But when we look at Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he went through great pain in his life. And he wasn't just disconnected from one caretaker like Musa. He was disconnected from several caretakers. So he came into the world without his father. Like his father wasn't there. And this is, this is a society that was very patriarchal, right? And very, the value of a child or their worth is known by who their father was. So much so that when people came from the Bedouin area to take the children back to breastfeed them, they didn't want, a lot of them didn't, they overlooked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why? Because he didn't have a father. But he lost one caretaker after another. And so I remember, it was Amu Fikri actually, he was asking us, and we're studying the seerah, and he said, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, keep like testing him with him not having his caretakers? He lost all this loss. And so the answer is so that Allah could be his direct Rabb. And that's what you see with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His link to Allah is so strong that even when he was tested in Ta'if, right, when he was thrown rocks at by children who are supposed to be the kindest, most purest, what was his concern? That Allah was not displeased with him. He says, I complain. He first speaks about his own weakness when he turns to du'a. And then he seeks refuge in Allah from what has happened to him. But his concern was, if you are not displeased with me, that he's okay. But then he says but I would be much happier with your mercy. So yeah, I accept, I'm content with whatever you give me as long as you're not displeased with me, but your happiness, but your mercy, right? So that's a loving relationship. That's a beautiful, fulfilling relationship that you have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is just to emphasize that there's a link, there's this rope that we have to hold on to with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's this beautiful link that we have to access. Not just, okay, I completed my acts of worship. No, who is the one you speak to when something good happens? Who is the one you speak to when something bad happens? Who is the one, you thank when you get anything in your life? And so it's creating this connection. They say, like, one of the signs you love someone is that they're the first person you want to tell your good news to, and they're the first person you want to tell your bad news to. That's, they say, one of the signs that you love someone. So is Allah our greatest love? Is He the first one we tell our good news to? Is He the first one we share our discomforts with? So cultivating that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, giving that ruh, who we are, what it needs. A constant connection with Allah, not just in prayer, but outside of prayer, in anything we are doing.